Hari Om. Chapter 11 is a chapter that fascinates many a reader because of its astounding revelation of what we can never imagine through words, of course, and yet it is this astounding reality of our own lives. It is vast and it is so astonishing that Arjun, like us, is actually drop-jawed about it, and he is in awe and he is in complete amazement. That's the description that we are looking at of that ultimate reality. So Bhagavan says, yes, this is my Virat Roop, this is my Vishwaroop. But we may hasten to add that Vishwaroop is not a roop in the sense that it is not a limited form. It cannot be. And it is actually the totality of existence. It is that supreme consciousness that pervades everything. It is actually the absolute Sat of our lives and of everything else in Brahman. It is that absoluteness which is called the Virat Roop. Yes, of course, there is an artistic representation of it, and therefore when we see chapter 11, verse number 19, let's see how the description goes in the words of Arjun. Anadi madhyantam ananta viryam ananta bahum shashi surya netram. So I see endless arms and endless faces, and I see the sun and the moon in your eyes. Paschami tvam deepta hutasha vaktram. And this prana shakti is needed in me just to be able to view that expanse, that vastness. Arjun is saying these things. Swatejasa vishwamidam tapantam. So actually what Arjun is looking at is not millions of arms and legs. Literally, what he is actually gazing into is infinity. If we can imagine such an action, gazing into infinity, no wonder he has lost his bearings and he has lost his sense of direction, which he explains, which he laments in the ensuing verses. Now, why is it that we can't see this infinity, this vastness, this absoluteness? Not because it's something out there, but Krishna has hastened to remind us over and over again that this is our own reality. It is the substratum of our reality, and yet we cannot fathom it. We cannot fathom the depths. We cannot even pierce the expanse. It's just too vast for us. Why can't we ever view it? Of course, Arjun, how is he able to do it? So we may remind ourselves, it is because Arjun has been given Divya Drishti, and what we have been endowed with is the normal Charma Chakshu. So Charma Chakshu means the physical eyes, and therefore people with physical eyes will have a limited vision. What is our limited vision? We can see just as far as our next project, or as far as our next little sukha or dukha. If we see an illness which is fatal, then we see dukkha impending, or we are in anticipation of some sukha. It is just as far as that we are able to view. Can you imagine? In the proportion of this vast Brahmand, our vision is so limited, so myopic. So we are leading actually a very myopic life. Myopic meaning it's like looking at a book and trying to read it at a distance of 6 inches. We will see some dark letters, but we won't make any sense of it. It's too myopic. We need a larger view. So Arjun has Divya Chakshu. Yes, that is the grace of God, and therefore he can see the vastness. We have physical eyes, so we see the physical world, and it is limited to the sansari environment and the sansari preoccupations of our life. That's about how far we can see. But there are also, so this can be called the Charma Chakshu, that is literally it means the flesh eyes, or it can also be called the Bhog Drishti. Bhog Drishti is a more accurate description. Why? because bhog means enjoyment of something, partaking of something, and we seem to be living in this world with a view that we are here to consume this or that, to enjoy this or that, to have this or that, to accumulate this or that. उसको हिंदी में भोग कहते हैं. So we are living through our bhog drishti. So naturally sansar seems like a limited bhog vastu to us. All people, events, everything is a bhog vastu. But there is a second kind of drishti which some people have. If they have entered the field of knowledge and scriptures, then संतों ने ये कहा है कि they have a vivek drishti. This is better now. Vivek drishti simply means, vivek means discernment. Discernment between what? Sat and asat. Between permanent and impermanent. So those who have read the scriptures or have delved a little bit into the words of the rishis, they begin to have a certain distance from this sansar, and they have what is called vivek, discernment. Oh, this is all impermanent. Why am I getting involved in it? Let me have a larger view of life. So that is the vivek drishti people. Okay, slightly larger view. There is also the bhakti drishti. Now bhakti drishti is what? It's like saying, I don't know God, I cannot, my small little mind, my small little body, it cannot fathom the vastness and the immensity of your existence. But I still am devoted to you. Bhakti is like blind kind of devotion and faith, Shraddha, in the immensity of that final absolute truth. Actually, it is a belief in the absoluteness of it. कि उनके बाद तो कोई और है ही नहीं. And beyond that, there is nothing. That kind of Shraddha, although the mind cannot grapple with it, that is called the Bhakti Drishti. So, people like Kabir and Jalaluddin Rumi or Mirabai or Nizamuddin Aulia, and these are people who have been blessed with Bhakti Drishti. They can feel the immensity in their hearts, but if you ask them to describe, they're describing only in terms of love poems and love songs for the God. So words and the thoughts and mind and intellect cannot reach there. For them, that immensity has descended into their hearts. So that's the Bhakti Drishti. तो हम तो उस कैटेगरी में भी नहीं आते, क्योंकि in order to have this kind of virakti meaning detachment from sansar and a complete devotion and drowning ourselves in the bhakti of that immense absolute, that ultimate. Of course, they may give it many names. So they may say, Allah or God or Khuda or Bhagwan or Brahma. It doesn't matter. It's that immensity that their heart can feel. And therefore, they are swimming in that immensity. We don't even feel that. एक तो इंटेलेक्ट ने, विवेक इंटेलेक्ट ने भी नहीं पहचाना, भक्ति हार्ट ने भी नहीं पहचाना, एंड the final one and the best one, of course, is Divya Drishti. That is what Arjuna has been given. And that Divya Drishti is the one that rishis enjoyed. Rishis meaning those who went into deep samadhi with this question, with this thought, I want to know that ultimate reality. And when they went into that samadhi with that question in mind, the immensity, the absoluteness, the Brahman revealed itself to them. And this happens in every field. Whenever we are dwelling on some question or some kind of an idea, and then we leave it, we let it dwell in the mind for some time and let it float around for some time, and but we're engaged with it subconsciously. At some point of time, we have this great revelation, we may call it, or a great instinctive idea or an inspiration that just drops into the mind. When we say it drops into the mind, drops from where? There has to be some location from where it comes, right? So the immensity, the vastness, that Virat Roop of Bhagwan is where everything is held. Everything is held in that Virat Roop, and therefore the idea also, which we get as an inspiration, aha, ab ye karte hain. Or Archimedes, who said, Eureka, I found out the law of displacement. That, or Newton, who said, oh, I found out the law of gravity. It is something that drops into the head because we are dwelling in it and we are invoking the idea, and that idea reveals itself. Everything in the world works like that. So does Brahman. So does the idea of I want to find God. Suppose the bhakti or the jnani people, whoever it is, they go into their search through jnana or through bhakti or any path or karma yoga. Once they have taken that path and they are consistent and insisting upon it and invoking it all the time, sooner or later, if not in this lifetime, in some other lifetime, that truth, that highest truth will reveal itself to them. And therefore then we will say, oh, this person has a divya drishti. He is a jivan muktaha. That means in life itself he has become a liberated soul. Muktaha. Divya drishti. So this is of course the highest form. We don't know of many people who have a divya drishti, but they are the ones who can see the Virat Roop, the universal Satya. Okay, having said this, we were asking why we can't see that Virat Roop, because now we know that we are a little far away from that Divya Drishti. We haven't even come to immerse ourselves fully in Bhakti Drishti, and we haven't even gone deep enough in contemplation and manan of Nitya, Anitya, permanent, impermanent, all the time, to have a Vivek Drishti. That is the Jnani ki Drishti. In तीनों में से we are dabbling in a little bit of this and little bit of that, but we have not immersed ourselves. But mainly 80% of the time we have engaged ourselves in the sansar, and therefore we have a sansari drishti. So how far are we going to view our vision? Our vision can view only up to the sansar. And therefore we need not complain that Krishna, you cannot do this. I also want to see the Virat Roop. Bhagavan says, okay, if you have the capacity to gaze into that vast infinity without fear, yes, you are also a fit candidate for it. Why not? आप भी पात्र हैं इसके. But it is a frightful sight. Let's see how frightening it can be. Verse number 22, chapter 11. Arjun continues his description of Virat Roop. Dhyava prithivyoridhamantaram hi vyaptam tvayakena dishascha sarvaha. So here he says, heaven and earth and the space below, all the space between heaven and earth and in between all the planets, is completely seems to be filled by you alone. You alone, that vastness. It doesn't have a form, let's remember, but it is a vastness and it is conscious. It is not an inert space. If we remember that, we can have a greater understanding of the absolute. And therefore he says everything is filled by you. Vyaptam, it means it pervades. Tvayakena dishascha sarvaha. Dishas, all the directions that I see only your form. Right now the form is being described as an artistic representation. Drishtvaadbhutam rupamugram tavedam lokatrayam pravyathitam mahatman. Oh great soul, I see amazing, it is so amazing that it terrifies me. This form of yours is actually terrifying me. I think Arjun is saying I was better off knowing you as my cousin, knowing you as my charioteer, knowing you as my childhood friend, but this is something I have been unprepared for, and it is tough for me to grapple with. Lokatrayam pravyathitam mahatman. Oh great soul, all the three worlds seem to be trembling with fear with this view of the Virat Roop. And we definitely cannot view the Virat Roop. We are not fit candidates for it because we have limited ourselves to this body, that I am this Nam Roop and I am this mind and this likes and dislikes of my mind, and we have actually constricted our own existence willfully, saying I am only this, I am this mind and this body and this intellect, and therefore to see beyond that is for us very difficult. In fact, we find it difficult even to have an empathy towards anything which is beyond our own family and community. I mean, if we are so limited in our selfishness. So being very, very limited little creatures of our own likes and dislikes and pleasures and pains, and being engrossed in these, it's hard to see that ultimate reality. And so Bhagwan is saying, and so Arjun is saying, look, all the three worlds are trembling in fear at this sight. It's not really a fearful sight. I don't think so. I just think that it is something that we are unprepared for by our little minds. It's a bit like climbing up the Eiffel Tower and then saying, oh, I'm feeling dizzy. Yes, you will feel dizzy if you are unprepared, and there are many people who have a fear of heights. In fact, they can't go up to the 30th floor of a building. So it's that kind of thing. It's not like as if Eiffel Tower is meant to frighten them, or that the space between the top of the tower and the ground is meant to frighten human beings. Nothing of the sort. It is the human himself who is carrying this inbuilt incapacity. So when we say, oh, I have a fear of heights, I'm feeling dizzy on the Eiffel Tower, okay, so it's our business. Then we have to figure out there's nothing frightening about space or distance or heights in itself. That means inherently. So that's how Arjun is now in a quandary. Should he fear? Should he worship? Should he bow down? Should he just withdraw from this frightful sight? And so in 21 he goes on to describe further the Virat Roop, the Vishwaroop, that he has had the privilege to view actually. Ami hitvam sura sangha vishanti kechid bhita pranjalayo grinanti. And I see a host of devatas who are existing, and they are entering into you. So, devatas, okay, so they are all entering you. This is, of course, as I said, this is a graphic and artistic representation. So we need not take it literally. Kechid bhita pranjalayo grinanti, and they are extolling you. They're extolling you, that means they're praying to you and they are praising you out of sheer fear. Swastityuktva maharshi siddha sanghaha sunvanti tvam stutibhi pushpalabhihi. And the bands, there are bands of great rishis and siddha purush, people who have realized their siddhas, and they are praising you with sublime hymns. That's what Arjun is viewing actually. And he sees that even the rishis and devatas are trembling in fear, and they have now begun to pray or to praise this vast reality, this universal truth, this Virat Roop. Stutibihi. Stutibihi means to praise, to extol actually. Now, why is this happening? One, because when they see that everyone and all the devatas and all the rishis, without any distinction of who's cultured, who's uncultured, and who is great and who's not so great, who's noble and who's ignoble, without any distinction, everyone is entering this great mouth, so-called, which has been depicted here, which simply means the hidden messages that the viewer suddenly, when he has this vast view of existence and knows that in this existence there is bound to be a cycle of birth and death and extinction and rebirth. Of course, he is not so much bothered about rebirth, but he says, oh, extinction and death. So there's an inherent fear of death. And there, the viewer of this Virat Roop begins to feel that, look, I have no defense against death and against destruction. I have no defense. No. Bhagavan says, no, why do you need a defense? That is the law of nature. See how carefully we defend ourselves against something that is actually a natural process of the universe. I'm reminded of a vision that I just cooked it up. Suppose we are flung into space. And in space, we are viewing the Earth, our beloved Earth, the only inhabited planet that we know for now, and we view it from a distance, and what do we see? since we have this great distance between the earth and ourselves, and between our lives on earth and ourselves, for that moment that we are floating in space, we see on the earth the great heaving oceans. And in some part we see a tsunami, another place we see a volcano erupting, and some places there's war and bombs being dropped, and there is hunger, and there's famine, and there's prosperity, and there are people zipping about in their jets. So you see aeroplanes also moving around, and so everything is going on. And as the earth rotates on its axis, and you are still viewing it, and then you see the other face of the earth, and you see the changing seasons, and the seasons are changing, and then and night and day, of course, is also alternating. And then when you see all this, you begin to feel that everything that is happening is actually the law of nature, and is happening the way it is meant to happen. Yes, even the wars that you are viewing from that distance floating in space, even the wars in some sense are predetermined. Who is going to live, who is going to win, who is going to, because there is no time frame in which consciousness functions. Consciousness is only one. And if you put yourself in the place of that consciousness, and suppose you become that, actually we are that, we would say there is no time existence, and I can see everything happening all at once. I can see the outcome of some of the wars, but the outcome of the wars already happened, because you're seeing it from consciousness. Anyway, so what does it all mean? The hidden meaning is that no, you don't have a defense against death and destruction, because that's the natural law of nature, and the seasons will change, and wars will be fought, and there will be defeat and victory, and there will be ups and downs, and there will be peace and war, and there will be famine and prosperity. Everything will happen in its own cycle and its own way. And when you see the law of nature just functioning as if you're just a bystander in space, you say, okay, that's fine. Then why resist it? That's okay. And then you look around and you say, oh, here's Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter. So you look around and you have a view, and you say, oh, there are these great, huge storms of gaseous matter which is floating about. And there are these cold waves, freezing cold waves. Okay, so that's the nature of that planet. So what's the big deal? And the nature of our planet is the way it is. There will be human beings, and they will engage in all kinds of antics like war and deprivation and accumulation and capitalism and greed and hunger. Yes, that's the law of humans, because that inhabited earth has got these particular creatures on it. And then you look at all the planets and you see they're all functioning by according to the law of physics, the law of nature, which determines their functioning. That's all. That's the law of nature. So Virat Roop actually stands for that ultimate universal law. Nothing more, nothing less. Yes, we can't view it. We can only imagine it. So I may imagine it as this kind of imaginary caricature. Somebody might describe it as a picture of a million heads. Million heads, why? Because there are so many things that exist at the same time within the same on the same substratum. So that's the significance of so many hands and legs. But the men of wisdom, they actually know this. They know that when they are dead, or when this great mouth which is swallowing up all the devtas and all that when we are dead, nothing essential is lost. Yes, something is lost. We've lost our name, our bodies, our relationships, our families. Nothing which is essential to our nature, our very tattva, it's not lost. Consciousness has gone nowhere. So the wise people, the people of wisdom, they know this, and therefore they're not fearful, and they're not living in dread of death and destruction or even change. We live in the slightest dread of hair turning grey, of muscles going weak, of joints becoming weak. Yes, this is the law of nature, and we are in absolute dread because we know that ultimately the ultimate truth is death. Truth for the body, not for consciousness. Yes. So, but what about the deluded people? Not the men of wisdom. They are really troubled by death, destruction like us, and of dissolution. But death, destruction, dissolution and change is the very law of nature, as we saw from space, floating up there, and we saw, all this is happening on Earth. Something else is happening, the great storms of dust blowing on Moon and Mars, and there are some frozen lakes on Mars, and that's how it is. So am I going to lament the fact that the lakes are frozen on Mars, that there are dusty storms on Moon, that there are gaseous storms on Jupiter? Am I going to lament it? It sounds ridiculous to us, but that's how ridiculous we sound when we are lamenting what's happening in our lives. Oh, this is very bad. Oh, that's very bad. Yes, it's all law of nature. It's all ordained by that higher power. Therefore, Arjun says, out of sheer fear, these gods who were being swallowed by the big Virat Roop, they started doing Stunvanti Tvam, your praises. They started singing, and hymns, Stutibihi, they started singing your hymns. And we often do that when we are in awe. Okay, now, accept our temporary names. Yes, our names are temporary. We think our names are forever. And accept our temporary bodies. We are going to lose nothing when the Virat Roop finally swallows us, which it will, in cycles, in millions and millions of cycles. So there's this story that Osho narrated once. He said that Gautam Buddha was meditating up in a cave, and one of his disciples, Virat, his name was Vimal Kirit, not Virat, Vimal Kirit, he kept going up to the cave, and he was a very new kind of a monk, a little novice, who had just joined, and he really didn't know how he should conduct himself. So out of anxiety, he kept climbing up to the cave and asking Buddha, are you okay? How are you? Are you okay? At one point, Buddha had to let go, and he said, what do you mean how I am? First of all, please understand that I, as a body, am fine. But I am not only fine, I am Shashvat. Now that's a great declaration. Meaning to say, why are you giving so much attention, drawing my attention all the time to the body? How are you? How are you? How are you? Why don't you ask a larger question? And what is that larger question? And many of our gurus, some of our gurus, they don't always ask us, अच्छा आप कैसे हैं और job कैसी चल रही है, all those questions of sansar, they avoid. They just say one thing. They say, आपकी साधना कैसी चल रही है? What is your spiritual progress? And the other thing is, spiritual progress is towards what they want you to reiterate. Yes, my spiritual progress is towards finding out who am I. My own original tattva I want to find out. Okay, तो वो साधना कैसे चल रही है? Who am I का? And then when you really find out and you become a person of wisdom, someday you will say, oh, I have found out who I am. I am Shashvat. Shashvat meaning eternal. Consciousness can never be destroyed, and you are that. So you are that. I am Shashvat. I am eternal. I have found it. वो साधना की तरफ आप कहाँ तक जा रहे हैं? ये प्रश्न पूछना चाहिए. So that's why Gautam Buddha said, look here, stop asking me, drawing attention to the body, how are you? I am fine and I am Shashvat. I am not only fine, but I am actually eternal. So forget about asking. Now, talking about sadhana and spiritual progress, we must remind ourselves over and over again that it is only in the human form or human birth that it is possible for us to actually discover this eternal truth. Who am I? That Shashvat. Therefore, the young novice was told, don't ask who am I. Just remember, I am fine and I am eternal. I am Shashvat. I'm better than fine, which means I'm better than fine. I'm actually Shashwat, eternal. Animals are programmed. They are completely programmed how they're going to lead their lives, how they're going to instinctively follow their, desire for food and mating and sleep and rest and security. That is their instinctive programming. Human beings are also programmed for these things, plus one more ability to find spiritual progress, to look for something higher. So aren't we going to find our true vocation? Vocation meaning our true purpose? Yes, I think that would be inevitable if we are following the path that is being shown to Arjun as Virat Roop. Verse 23. Now Arjun is describing, so he is now elaborating on the experience he has of viewing this great Virat Roop or Vishwa Roop, which is actually just a universal, not just, but it is the universal reality, the absolute truth. It is the totality of existence. So imagine seeing totality, but we cannot view it because our vision is like looking through a peephole. And I have given this example before. It's like living in a big room and there is one small little peephole which has been knocked in it through a nail. And through that peephole, we are trying to look out at the universe and saying, "Ha, ye universe hai." We can see only a fraction of it. And therefore, our mind needs to expand from this little peephole of an existence. My existence is now limited to mera body, mera profession, and my wealth and my property, my name, my accomplishments, my achievements, my family. My existence being limited to these has limited or constricted my vision to a peephole. उसके beyond मुझे अगर कुछ देखना हो तो विराट रूप तो छोड़िए, हम तो पूरा I cannot even have a global world view about existence. So I keep blaming this nation or that nation or this community or that community because I don't have a global view. Global to chhodiye, Bhagwan is saying, have a view of the Brahmand, this entire universe. That is Virat Roop. So Arjun saying, okay, I'm going to attempt describing it. And verse number 23. Rupam mahatte bahuvaktra netram mahabaho bahubahu rupadam Bahubahurupadam. Okay, so this is an immeasurable form with many, many eyes and mouths and multiple arms and thighs and feet and stomachs, and it looks like a fearful creature with tusks. Bahudaram bahudamshtakaralam drashtva lokah pravyathitas tataham. Okay. So 23. Millions and millions of beings and creatures, and therefore it has been described, the hidden meaning behind all these number of arms and legs and eyes. It's that number of beings are all existing on the same substratum. That means there is so much of diversity. But on what? On the surface only. For example, if you go into cyberspace and you're shopping online, and when you go into shopping online, the first thing you need to do is what? To connect to Wi-Fi. So you need an internet, first electricity and internet. So when you connect to that internet or Wi-Fi, it is like connecting to the super consciousness, the totality. Now I get into Wi-Fi and I surf and I get into there are many apps first of all, and within the apps there are many products. So I surf for many books and some dresses and some automobiles and some scriptures, and I keep surfing, and there are so many millions of products. It is a bit like Rupam Mahatte Bahuvaktra Netram. Your Amazon is like this, Bahuvaktra Netram. It's like a big monster with lots of mouths and eyes and arms and legs, because it seems to contain so many things. You just have to wish for something and it's there in Amazon, big monster. It's going to devour our life, by the way. So this cyberspace, This Wi-Fi that I have to connect to connects me to millions of other beings and creatures. And all these objects exist where? They exist on the same substratum. The same substratum of that app. These apps are hosting them, right? But the apps themselves are actually powered by the device, which is powered by electricity, which is powered by Wi-Fi. So that supreme power behind everything we are unable to see. Why? Because we are so lost in all these objects that we are seeing around us, and people, and vyakti, and relationships, and vastu, paristiti. This is my situation. You know what happened to me the other day. All kinds of relating to the incidents of our lives and events of our lives and people and relationships. We are relating only to all these things. Arey bhai, these are all things which are contained on the app. But this app itself is powered by a super consciousness. वो substratum नहीं होता, Wi-Fi या electricity, you wouldn't have access to any of this. So, in short, we are saying that everything exists on the same substratum. Are we tuned in to the Wi-Fi? If we are not tuned in, then we are unable to see the diversity, the vastness, the cosmic view of everything. We just have a very myopic, small view. So, what is the small, myopic view we have? Oh, the view I have is I am unique. I have this talent or that talent. I am more qualified, you see. I am prettier. I am more talented. I am gifted, and I have been luckier than so and so. I am more competent. Do you understand? In my office, this is the conversation that goes on in the head. And it's all revolving around the little I. The little छोटा me, मैं. तो इसके सिवा हम अपने आप को और कुछ नहीं समझ पाते. Therefore, how can we ever identify with that creator, that vast creation itself, with that vast infinity? तो उस creation के साथ तो छोड़ो, we are in this small little life of separation. Everything is separated. मैं, मेरा, my acquisition, my family, my grandchildren, my children, ये वो मेरा is a sense of separation. But Bhagavan is saying, look at my Virat Roop. Everything is devoured by me. Rupam Mahatte Bahuvaktra Netram. I devour everything within these millions of eyes and arms and legs and diversity which you see. आप अगर oneness देखने लगेंगे ना यूनिवर्स में, क्योंकि oneness ही है substratum में, oneness ही है. ऊपर surface पर जैसे कि waves on an ocean, you see diversity. And this diversity, Bhagavan is saying, is not me. It is just playing on my surface. And all these are superficial distinctions only. Finally, where do they merge? तो जब हम बंद कर देते हैं, डिवाइस भी बंद कर दिया, ऐप को क्लोज कर दिया कि भाई इसमें हमको कोई पसंद नहीं आया, ऐप बंद करो. बंद कर दिया एप्लीकेशंस, डिवाइस भी बंद कर दिया, लेकिन वाईफाई कहाँ गया? कहीं नहीं गया. वाईफाई इज देयर whenever we tune in whatever state we tune in, wherever we tune in, Wi-Fi will always be there. Please don't take this literally, because I know there are places on this earth where Wi-Fi doesn't reach. It's just a limited example to exemplify something which is actually unlimited. Anyway, so the Wi-Fi thing is always there. It doesn't go anywhere. But all those millions of products which I saw them. I actually saw the color, shape, form of all these books and automobiles which I was surfing. They were real. Yes, they were real. Where are they now? They have merged back into where they came from, which means that they are in the unmanifest form now. Unmanifest form में चले गए हैं. कौन सी चीजें? All the things which I saw on my app have become unmanifest. Which means simply that all these gods and demigods which are being devoured by this Virat Roop, in this description, Virat Roop is devouring all the gods and demigods. Yes, devouring simply means that we all finally merge back into the consciousness. All the apps are closed and everything goes into unmanifest, and they merge back into unmanifest. The waves are rising and they all rise and merge back into the ocean. So this vast ocean of consciousness is where we have to merge back. There is no other truth about our existence. चाहे हम अपने को जितना महान समझ लें, जितना अमीर, जितना टैलेंटेड, जितना प्रिटी, जितना सेपरेट, जितना यूनिक, अरे हमें ये खासियत है, उनमें वो खासियत, जितना खास समझ लें अपने आप को, the truth of everyone who is खास and not so खास, the truth of both is that they will merge back into the same consciousness, क्योंकि उन दोनों की consciousness है ही वही, they are of the same तत्व, वो है ही वही, they are the same. Oneness of existence देखने का नाम है अद्वैत, और इस अद्वैत फिलॉसफी को ही वेदांत में बताया गया है. अद्वैत मीन्स नो डुअलिटी, वननेस. और हमको सिर्फ डिस्टिंक्शन, सेपरेटनेस और डुअलिटी दिखती है बिकॉज ऑफ द सो मच ऑफ डाइवर्सिटी. सो सी बियॉन्ड इट, यानी कि हमको इस संसार दृष्टि से आगे अगर कुछ दिखाई दे सकता है तो सिर्फ इस विवेक के कारण. विवेक, डिसर्नमेंट, विवेक दृष्टि तो लाओ, दिव्य दृष्टि तो दूर की बात है. विवेक दृष्टि अगर मिल जाए तो भी थोड़ा डिस्टेंस मिल जाता है बिटवीन our little preoccupation of the sansar and its inexorable turbulent sukha and dukkha waves. We want freedom from it. At some point we say, I don't see any meaning in all this. What is the whole purpose? And therefore, to come out of it, there is only one way, is to think out of the box. Just get out of the box. And like I said, I love that image of you. Just fling yourself out into space and say, अब मैं स्पेस में फ्लोट कर रहा हूँ, मैं वहीं से देख रहा हूँ ये धरती पर हो क्या रहा है. एंड धरती इंक्लूड्स मी. आई एम ऑल्सो सिटिंग इन that planet, in that little subcontinent, and in that little city, in that little house, in that little room. Yes, मैं भी हूँ वहाँ पे. हाँ, लेकिन अब मैं I can see it from a distance, थोड़ा दूर से, कि this is all temporary. ये distance चाहिए. So, the trouble with Virat Roop and Vishwaroop description is that we struggle to put into form, because even words are forms, by the way. Words are like painting without a brush, but they are also dealing in forms and shapes and sounds. So the trouble is, how do we paint or describe something which is abstract? For example, if you see someone very compassionate and I say, ये compassion मुझे नहीं मालूम है, ये क्या चीज होती है, जरा आप पेंट करके बताएंगे, या उसका रूप बता देंगे, या उसको एक मिट्टी के स्टैचू में ढाल के बता देंगे कंपैशन क्या होता है. इट इज एन एब्स्ट्रैक्ट थिंग. एब्स्ट्रैक्ट इनटू फॉर्म टेक्स अवे its vastness, its depth. So here we see some more descriptions in verse 24. Verse 24, chapter 11. नभस्पृशं दीप्तमनेकवर्णं व्याप्ताननं दीप्तविशालनेत्रम्. I can see flames. Who is describing? Arjun is describing this Virat Roop. I can see flames which are rising up to the sky, and there are mouths and eyes which are wide open. Drishtva hi tvam pravyathitantaratma. Terrified. I'm terrified at this sight. Oh, Arjun, the great warrior, is terrified. Okay, let's see why. Dhritim na vindami shamam cha Vishnu. I need courage. I need peace. I need courage. I'm losing both, oh Vishnu. Vishnu, first of all, is a name which means all-pervading. That word itself means all-pervading and existing in all places at the same time. The secret meaning of this verse is that actually Nabha Sprisham, which means that the flames are touching the sky. Wherever my eyes reach, I cannot actually see the end of it, and it seems to be blinding me. It also means that there are endless and endless manifestations of form in this universe, in this Brahman. And as far as the eye can see so many manifestations of that Virat Roop. That means, is there an end to it? Is there a beginning to it? No. As far as the eye can see, Nabha Sprisham, touching the sky, it seems. Of course, we must remember that Divya Drishti, which was given to Arjun, is not a physical instrument. It is actually given to him in the mind's eye. So it is the inward eye in which he is actually able to see all this, the inward eye. Number 24. Okay. In 24, it's worth mentioning also that why is it that he is gripped in such fear? One of the reasons is that this is the first time Bhagwan has allowed Arjun to see his Virat Roop. But do you know, संतों का ये कहना है, ऐसे सुनने में आया है संतों से, कि not this Virat Roop actually, but the very tattva of Bhagwan is something that Bhishma in this battle, and even Vidur and Sanjaya and Kunti, they were aware of it. Sanjaya, of course, perhaps because when Krishna had gone to Dhritarashtra as an ambassador of the Pandavas to say, okay, please put an end to this war, do something, and Dhritarashtra did not agree. As an ambassador, when he had gone, he had shown Dhritarashtra his Virat Roop. But of course, it made no difference to Dhritarashtra, who was blinded inwardly and outwardly, completely blinded by his strong attachment, moha, which blinds us. That's why perhaps we are unable to see Bhagwan, because we are so blinded, like Dhritarashtra, in our own attachments to our things and possessions and families and relationships and our own sukha and dukha and our plans and our next project and our next plan of action of pleasure seeking, whatever. So we are attached basically to what we can bring to ourselves from this sansar. And so it seems that Bhishma, Vidur, Sanjay and Kunti knew of this roop of Krishna. But Arjun, whose charioteer Krishna was, Arjun was not aware of it. And therefore, why is Arjun in such fear? Because this is the first time he is viewing this tattva. And therefore, if you will recall, the very same vision is being seen by Sanjay, and he is relaying it to Dhritarashtra at this very moment in the battle of Kurukshetra. But Sanjay has never said that I am filled with fear and my heart shakes in complete anxiety and fear. No, Sanjay has never talked of fear. He was aware of the tattva. ये कुछ संतों का कहना है. And Arjun is a vimud. He's in the vimud bhav. Vimud bhav means deluded mode, like we and Dhritarashtra and like most of us. So Arjun is in that moha vimud mode. In that mode, it's impossible to see that highest tattva, the Krishna tattva, that unchanging tattva. And we say, नहीं, हमको अपनी दुनिया में रहना है, हमारे सब possessions और हमारे ideas about myself, मैं कौन हूँ, and मेरा नाम, मेरी प्रतिष्ठा, मेरा possessions, मेरा बैंक बैलेंस, मेरी फैमिली, ये सब को मैं पकड़ के रखूंगा और मुझे दिव्य दृष्टि भी चाहिए, मुझे भगवान भी देखना है. So you have, Chinmaya ji used to say, you have to let go of something in order to hold on to something higher. Holding on to both is going to be on very shaky ground. So it does occur to us that this great Virat Roop, Divisurya Sahasrasya, which was originally described as an explosion of 1,000 suns, and that's why he is blinded. Now, we may say that consciousness actually has been described as something that has no end, no beginning. If we look at a very simple example, when it says it stretches out into the sky in all directions, that is what Arjun is saying, isn't it? In all possible directions, I can see your form. It's not in form, but yes, I can see you stretching out. It simply means that there is no beginning and no end. Otherwise, we would see the end of something, like the end of my hand, the end of my compound. No, you can't see the end of it because it has no beginning, no middle and no end, which has also been mentioned before. If we look at something very, very ordinary in our life, and take an example from there. I hope this example helps. So there was a thought that dropped into my head the other day. Yes, yesterday I had this thought that I should I should order this new book. Where did the thought come from? It came yesterday. So the thought was in time. Today I have forgotten about it. The thought is gone. That means the thought existed in time. Thought existed in time. It was there once, it's not there now. Okay, so there was an element of time. What about me? I attended a satsang yesterday physically at the temple, and I was there in the afternoon. I, as a body, I was there. That means I know space. I was not here. I was there at the temple. So here and there is a matter of space. So my body knows space. My thoughts, they know time. Yeah. At this time, I've forgotten about this. What about consciousness in all this? Are we carrying consciousness around with us? Yes, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to perform any of the functions without consciousness. It's like Wi-Fi, which is not powering the device. So the device would be lying inert, our bodies. No. So we are not inert. That means consciousness is powering us. But at what time was it there and not there? It was always there. Okay. Where was it available and not available? Where? It was always with me. So there is no limitation of space or time where consciousness is concerned. It is, and it simply is. If it applies to me as a simple, ordinary human creature, then it applies to the entire Brahmand universe. That it is not a thing which can exist in time, कि आज है कल नहीं है, or space, कि यहाँ है और वहाँ नहीं है. Or so Desh, Kal and Vastu are the parameters that don't apply to consciousness. That's why Arjun is struggling to describe that I can see unending arms and legs and creatures and diversity, and I'm blinded and fearful. So these are the hidden meanings. That means consciousness is whole, it's complete. Another example which can exemplify this nature of consciousness is that when I am in the physical world, waking, when I am in the waking world, there is physical space around me and I can sense the space. So I am living in physical space. But in the dream world, I again have space. Why? Because it's an altered space. It's like augmented reality. That space is altered. It is not my physical space. I find myself in some other dream world where I am in some palace or flying a plane or my plane is crashing, whatever. It's another space which I can observe as a dreamer. But it's an altered space nevertheless. But in deep sleep, space disappears completely. But consciousness? No, it can't. If it had disappeared, we wouldn't wake up. So irrespective of space and time, consciousness exists. It still exists. So even when the body and mind is gone, like body and mind and intellect is there for me in the waking world, yes, it's there. And in the dream world, yes, it's there, but in an altered form. So I may be doing unusual things in my dream. So my body, mind, intellect exists in the dream world in an altered form, but in my dream sleep, where is it? Okay. So consciousness is not a thing or a being, a creature or an object also. It just is. That we have seen in our three states. Therefore, it's very important to understand and observe our three states of waking, dream and deep sleep, because this is our real experience day in and day out. Every day we experience this and we never wonder. That it is consciousness which is powering, and yet it is independent of my body, mind, intellect. Yes, it is. Pravyatita antaratma. The third line, it says Pravyatita antaratma. That one, he says, Arjun is saying, I'm too terrified. I am shaking in fear because of this extreme wonderment of your appearance. Why are we afraid? We actually psychologically assume the characteristics or the nature of anything that is around us. For example, this is just a psychological point. If we are in the company of very, very excitable people, somehow we also, seem to be touched by it and begin to get excited about this or that. If we are in the company of very calm, very serene, very santusht people, contented with their life, we seem to be affected, definitely affected by it. Now, Arjun is seeing this vast, amazing apparition in front of him, and therefore he cannot remain unaffected. And therefore he is saying, I am affected by fear, by wonderment, by amazement. We cannot remain unaffected in the company of this vastness. But it is the grace of Krishna that finally Arjun also comes out of his moha by the end of 18th chapter. Hopefully we also can follow him. He comes out of his moha, and he is not a moodhatma anymore, and he is also graced with the great knowledge at the end of 18th chapter. But here we see that even heroic hearts, when they see this awesome, they sense this awesome realization. Now I'm not talking of the vision of Virat Roop, but the realization of this, when it sinks into your heart once and for all, that everything is just one vast, from the Brahmand of the farthest galaxies, from the farthest galaxies right down to our little bodies. Everything is nothing but a vast mass of vibrating energy. And that is the only thing which will exist eternally. When we realize that realization is what makes us awestruck, and in some cases tremble with fear, as it does Arjun. But here we see a sudden change of attitude in Arjun. You can see, where he had begun. In the beginning he had asked, I want to know what is going to be the end of the war. I want to know about the war. Now he realizes how empty are his little vanities about himself, and his pride and his ahankar, and shallow vanities in which we all live, shallow little vanities. And knowing that this Panchatattva, it is only Panchatattva. It will be vileen, it will be merged in Panchatattva. What's beyond that? Now these are the questions which are troubling Arjun's mind when he sees, you can say, he can see the inexorability of death, of everything being swallowed, merging into one. Yes, merging is a good word, because death has many connotations. Merging is the thing that we are all looking for, because we are suffering from a malady called separateness. And because of this malady of separateness, of feeling distinct, all the other sufferings and sorrows actually emerge from here onwards. We are going to see how Arjun is going to be graced and blessed with some more visions in the Virat Roop chapter in the next class. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Hari